All right, so I'm here today with Tracey Hunter, who is in Australia actually. She's sat in Port Douglas at the moment, which I am very jealous about because I'm dying to get to the beach. She is a clinical psychologist and she works primarily with women's issues. And actually, I might throw over to you, Tracey, just so you can tell us a bit about who you are, what you do, where you've come from, and how you kind of approach your work.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So I work mainly with women who want to really cultivate more romance in their relationships, and they're wondering, what is blocking them from cultivating the sort of relationship that they might have dreamed of when they were younger. Do you know what I mean? So I'm a bit of a romantic. So, when you're 15 years old, years old or whatever, you have this idea of what you want this relationship to feel like in the future, and then you get there and stuff gets in the way, things block us. And so I guess I went on a journey to sort of figure out, for me personally, what was blocking me in having the sort of deep, loving, exciting, fun relationship in my own life. And now I teach that to other women.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's such a big part of what we do as therapists is that we kind of go on we go on these social experiments almost on ourselves, and we can impart that wisdom on other people. So talk to me a bit about how this started for you and where it kind of came from.
Oh, yeah. So there's a couple of different layers to it. One is my professional sort of training as a schema therapist. So learning about how childhood wounds or negative messages that we might receive in childhood, not just from the family environment, but society in general, about what it means to be self-expressed or what it means to be vulnerable or show emotions or put boundaries in place. So if we receive negative messages about those natural core human needs, then we will have developed schemas basically that stop us from being self-expressed and speaking our truth. So that model or that therapy approach resonated with me. So I went and got training in that in New York with Jeffrey Young, who's the founder of schema therapy. That was 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few years later, my own marriage ended because I guess as a result, partly of doing this work on myself and going, oh, there's some patterns here that need to come to the surface. And when you start to address the negative patterns and you start to release them, then, things really get sorted out at that point, don't they? So so just going on my own journey with relationships as well. And then I met my current partner actually 7 years ago yesterday. It was our anniversary. So having to really do deep inner work, I suppose, so that I didn't repeat the same patterns in my current relationship, and so that I could, cultivate the sort of relationship that I always wanted to have, that I always dreamed about having. Yeah.
And I really hear you in that. I think I've heard it said before that, that there should be three entities in healthy relationships, two sovereign individuals kind of operating in their own little solar systems, and then one kind of the third entity, which is the relationship, which is the kind of collaboration, whatever that looks like.
Yes, the dance. And step further and say these two sovereign individuals, most of the time one of them brings more masculine energy and one of them brings more feminine energy. And so these are two different energies that are coming together. And if you've got childhood wounds and you're a feminine being, then you might get really triggered by just a masculine partner just being autonomous and being in that healthy masculine energy, right? Because you're like, oh, they're not thinking of feelings right now, and you feel really triggered by that, but they're actually just bringing healthy masculine energy. Mm-hmm. Whereas, say, a masculine partner who is in the presence of a feminine partner who's expressing emotions and saying, I'm really this, like, if he's triggered by that because he's got wounds, because he doesn't know how to integrate the feminine, then the two of them are going to be battling with each other. Like healthy masculine is going to be suppressed.
This is fascinating. And so talk to me about, so what does a healthy, how would you go about integrating those two energies then, if you're both kind of in your own healthy, talk to me about that. Wow. Wow. This is
oh, I know. So the first great place to start would be to hopefully know what primary essence you are. Like, do you identify as being more feminine in your essence, and your gift in your relationship is that you are very heart connected and connected to beauty and togetherness and things like that? Or do you identify as being a more partner or energy person, which might be that you're very rational and very logical and have this nice plan for the future, and you're very autonomous, and that's really a gift that you bring to the relationship. So I think that's the place to start, is to just embrace who you are deep down. And not feel like you have to abandon yourself, abandon your feminine essence, or abandon your masculine essence in order to be in a relationship with another person.
And so it's about self-exploration and kind of understanding yourself, so you can show up in the fullness of whatever that is. Because I know Carl Jung talks a lot about like that internal, like that we've all got an internal or an archetypal feminine and an archetypal masculine. And I think, so you're saying which one you lean more heavily towards?
Yes. Like, and also, what are you most attracted to? Are you most attracted to what you consider to be masculine people, or are you mostly attracted to feminine people? That will probably tell you a lot about your own primary, because you're attracted to the opposite. Does that make sense?
Interesting. Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And so are you kind of saying almost that there's more of like a feminine essence in but then there's a little bit of masculine in most people, or do you always have a primary of one or another?
So I agree definitely with Carl Jung. I would hate to actually disagree with him on anything.
I disagree with Carl Jung.
I agree that individuation and wholeness is about integrating these two energies within yourself. So my primary essence would be feminine, and say, okay, I fully am an emotional creature, and not shame myself for my emotions, and actually see that as a gift that I can bring. But what does my inner masculine look like? My own inner healthy masculine is more of a stable, calm, solid sort of presence. Not this ball busting, out there in the world, like this shell of, I've got to achieve and be the best and all of that. That's not my own inner healthy masculine. My own inner healthy masculine is there to support my feminine expression, to go, yes, Tracey, you can say how you feel, because that's your greatest gift in the world, is to be honest about your feelings and what you feel in your body and what you feel in your heart. So does that make sense? So my own masculine supports me to be fully expressed in life.
And so how did you go about determining these parts of yourself? Was that through the process of schema therapy, or like how did you actually look at and articulate to yourself, okay, this is the feminine expression of me wanting to express how I'm feeling and to have a, to be emotive, and then the more masculine part of you coming up and being like, okay, but how do we navigate this so that we're doing this in a pragmatic and kind of healthy way?
So a lot of, I guess, what I learned was through training as a schema therapist. So learning about the inner child, so we call it the vulnerable child in schema therapy. And then we have a healthy adult, which sort of comes in and nurtures the vulnerable child. And then we have an inner critic. So all of those parts of the self I learned through schema therapy. But when my own when my own marriage ended and I started a new relationship and I needed relationship coaching, I just intuitively felt that I needed to go outside of psychology. I'm like, I already know everything that psychology is teaching, and you know what I mean. And I haven't come across, and I haven't come across. Well, at least if you're trained in more cognitive therapies, I haven't come across the concept that there are masculine and feminine parts of us, and that these are important in romantic relationships, like in all the psychological relationship approaches like Gottman's or emotion focused therapy, and all of that. They're about masculine and feminine energy. So I intuitively knew that I had to go outside of psychology, and then I started, I guess, following people online, and I came across these beautiful coaches in LA who are law of attraction coaches, not psychologists, not mental health professionals.
And I think this is the thing that traditional Western psychology is really building a bridge between Western psychology, kind of postmodern spirituality, and like this bridge is starting to get closer and closer. And I think this is the path that you and I both play on. So fascinating.
Yes. Yeah. And to be honest, I mean, Carl Jung was already doing it like 100 years ago, whatever, but somehow I missed the class on Carl Jung in my training.
I don't know if it's actually in that many Australian psychology courses. I know that we breezed over it because I know we went to university at a very similar place, and we breezed over Carl Jung as well. It's almost like he needs a master's degree just to cover him, basically.
Yeah, it's so true. Known about that master's degree, I probably would have done that one. Anyway, here we are. Yeah. So I got coaching in my relationship for myself, not for any professional reasons, but because I knew I needed someone to tell me, what am I doing wrong? Like, where am I getting tripped up? And they said, your connection to your feminine energy is not great. You know, I didn't have a lot of trust in the feminine itself, in the wisdom of my own emotions and my own heart, and that my body doesn't lie, and it's safe to start expressing that and bringing that into the relationship. And a healthy masculine partner is not going to run a mile when a feminine partner is expressing how she feels, because usually, you know, 9 times out of 10, even if we're expressing our emotions in an unskilled way, because we want to lead the relationship towards more love.
Yes. So this is so interesting for me, because when I hear about therapists talking about their own experiences, and I think this is what grounds it all in, is like your own lived experience of how to pull the bits of this puzzle together. And it's always such a beautiful thing when you see people weave their own personal story into their approach, because it comes from this very deeply grounded place, you know. And so so you're talking about kind of weaving in this kind of feminine energy into your relationships and feeling safe enough to express that. Why then do you feel like you at some point felt unsafe to play in that place?
Just a mixture of, I guess, modeling of emotional expression in my family growing up. You know, the idea that it wasn't entirely safe to express fully how you felt. But as well as, I think that's in the context of a broader, you know, thing that's going on in society, where, you know, if you grew up in the 80s or the 70s or the 50s or whatever, you've probably received messages that the feminine is a burden or irrational, or emotions are inferior data.
It's interesting, because I actually know a few people someone that I know quite well that used to turn around and say all the time, you know, I don't show emotion because it's weak, you know.
Exactly.
To be emotive or to be vulnerable is to show weakness. And I mean, obviously the work Brené Brown's done has done a lot to kind of undo that narrative, but it still exists to a certain extent. And as women, we feel I know for me, I can only speak for myself personally around this, is that I've often felt, you know, unable to, or actually not unable to, unwilling to express myself in that way because of how it's been met.
Yes, that's right. And I think that if you haven't seen other women model that to you, like if you haven't witnessed women who are fully connected to their hearts and saying, look, Lauran, this is how you create a beautiful, loving relationship. You just say how you feel. And we don't have a lot of models that have maybe gone before us and are specifically teaching us that this is how you can trust in the feminine, and this is how you can trust what your emotions are telling you and the need underneath your emotions. Like, I don't know, I just, you know, in all the stuff about relationships that you learn in, at least in psychology, there's a real strong rational kind of angle to it, you know.
Yeah, and not so much an experiential or expressive one. Yeah. There was that, sorry, that line.
So so I suppose so as a result of receiving this coaching and then applying what my coaches were telling me into my own relationship and seeing that, oh, there's such a safety in just surrendering to my true nature and just not trying to fight against my true nature, and just bringing more of this felt emotion into my relationship and not hiding that, and feeling free and getting the results, I suppose, because my partner is actually more attracted to me when I'm being more authentically myself. I'm hiding how I feel and things like that. So
and it's
it works.
Trust that authenticity. It's learning to trust that when you stand in the truth of who you are, it's got, by a healthy person, it is going to be met well. But what would you say to those women who maybe are in a situation that isn't like yours, where when they are being emotive, that they're not being met with that same sort of receptivity that maybe your partner was in his masculine enough to be able to receive?
Yeah, actually, I should say that when I started to be more emotionally expressed, it's not like my partner was just like, "I got you, babe." It wasn't like that.
He's like,
no. He
see like some weird Cinderella fantasy going on.
No. He probably responded in a way that you might typically expect men to respond, which is maybe that defensiveness and shut down and all of that. So what I would say to women listening to this is, at that point where they become dismissive and, you know, want to sort of brush it away and get defensive, that's the time for you to lean on your own inner masculine, because you're not getting healthy masculine from your partner in that moment, are you?
No. That's really interesting. So when you say, okay, so let's say, you know, we've had a fight with our partner, we've been emotive, you know, we've told him to go do one, whatever that, you know, like, or we've expressed the need, or we've gotten emotional, and he's responded in that way. That's when we need to call upon this inner masculine, these resources to self-soothe, or
it's self-soothing as part of it, but it's more like this inner force kind of goes, I believe what you're saying and I believe in what you're feeling.
I love that.
Doesn't right now. So don't argue about how you're feeling. Like, so I'm not gonna, if I say, I'm so upset that you did this and, you know, you didn't listen, and if he gets defensive, I'm not gonna escalate it and argue my point even more, because then we're just in a fight about who's the loudest and whatever. But there's no openness. I don't feel like he's open to hearing about how I feel in that moment. So what can you do? You can escalate it and fight more and try and shout your point, and you become really dysregulated, and you're probably going to say some pretty toxic stuff at some point there. Or you can go, he's not open to hearing how I feel right now. I need to lean back into my own inner state of consciousness and awareness and just know the truth of how I feel.
And it's I'm onboarding my own inner resources.
And come back to this later. Yes.
I love that. That is huge, because I think so often, and the reverse happens as well. Oh, she's being too emotional, therefore I'm going to attack that rather than call on my inner feminine and be able to see that. So it's a dance. Exactly. Started. Yeah.
It's a dance. And the more you develop, the more I developed this, and I guess what I was demonstrating is that I've got my own inner resources where I know the truth of my emotions. So I'll just go off and do my own thing and become autonomous in those moments. Mm-hmm. I guess what that was showing to my partner was that I can lean on my own resources if I need to, but I actually want to be able to lean on you in moments like this. I want you to be able to be there for me. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's more inviting. It's more inviting for a partner to want to learn how to sit with you in moments of stress like that, because you haven't put it all on them. You haven't gone like, you're the only person that can support me. You're like, oh, I can support myself too if you're not going to be there in those moments. But that inspires them to want to step into that space with you more.
Yes. And I think this is just, it's so huge, because it's this thought of like, I'm just going to onboard that part of me that can protect myself,
right,
that can kind of
like, yes,
at that inner strength, my own inner resources, that I believe you, I believe in your emotional experience, and the way that you're feeling is okay. It's almost just like, I'm not looking to my partner to validate that for me. I can actually validate my own emotional experience, so that then that takes that off the table as an area of like kind of contention almost.
Yeah, area of contention. And I'll say what makes a big difference is I guess the extent to which you might have had a male figure step in your childhood and provide that kind of space. Obviously, that gives you an advantage. If you've had a father that, is solid and very present and all of that, then you've already got that archetype developed in you. But if you're a woman and you haven't had a male figure provide that for you, then you have to actually scaffold that yourself. You have to kind of start from scratch, and it doesn't seem fair, right? It doesn't seem fair that some women have had these lovely father figures and then others haven't. But you almost have to go, what male figure comes to mind for you? What kind of you want to have 24/7 access to? Like, is it a character from a movie? I don't know, like anything archetypally.
Yeah, I know, because I remember at one point I was doing some work around this, and my archetypal masculine showed up like this awkward Englishman, like Hugh Grant. It was really interesting. But the thing that it was really interesting, because my grandfather was a dancer, he was a beautiful ballroom dancer, and he was English, and so it was almost like that was the energy for me that was kind of true, and that's kind of that was how it appeared to me visually. It's just
that makes total sense. Like Hugh Grant has got that sort of presence that it would feel quite safe, wouldn't it, if he was there and he was like bumbling along with
that bumbly kind of gentle presence,
yeah. Oh, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, he's kind of evolved a bit since then, but like the first time I remember, because it's interesting how that can evolve over time as well, and your relationship with that part of yourself does really or my relationship with that part of myself really strengthened over that period of time.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
So and
yes.
Sorry, did you have something else to say about that? And I've got another question. I've got so
many no, go on. Yes.
So then how does this play into this idea of romantic relationships? And like, because I know over COVID, I know we were speaking about this pre-call, that over COVID there has been like this unhealthy kind of almost dependency that's kind of gotten plowed into romantic relationships. So the increase in the use of things like pornography and that kind of validation machine that can tend to be romantic relationships. I want to understand your take around that, around the way, because to kind of frame it for you, I had a place across the road, someone that lives across the way, and they were involved. Obviously, there were two people that were involved in a romantic relationship, and this man was like downstairs yelling up at the window of this woman, and then he tried to scale the building, and it's almost like there's this yeah, I know, it was quite full on, but it was almost, I'm sensing this energy around romantic relationships at the moment where people are using them almost like a drug, like an addiction, like something to self-soothe on. I want to get your take on that because I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah, okay. So I suppose there's different parts of us that seek romantic relationships. So our ego is one part that seeks a romantic relationship, and that's fine. But if it's just your ego seeking a romantic relationship, then your agenda would be to just sort of siphon that person's energy for your own, just to boost up your self-esteem or something like that. So it's almost like it's a little bit adolescent, to be honest. If you're just approaching relationships from that perspective, where you're like, what can this person give me, in terms of a boost? Or a distraction, or a dopamine hit, or an oxytocin hit, or a serotonin hit.
And so it's more so because, but you do see it happen quite a lot in adult relationships, adult human relationships, where there are two people just kind of that are essentially very in these kind of codependent or love addicted kind of places.
Yes. So coming back to Jung, Jung might say that they haven't really achieved wholeness or individuation, like they haven't cultivated their own inner healthy masculine or inner healthy feminine, and also that opposite energy as well. Because when you have access to your own feminine but also masculine, then you're not needing to siphon that from someone else in the world, if that makes sense. You know how to nurture yourself and nourish yourself and celebrate beauty and sexuality and all of that, as well as earn an income and be autonomous and travel and all of that. If you've cultivated that in yourself, then you don't need to get that energy from someone else. It shifts, and you're like, I want to bring the best of myself and share that with someone. So there's less of a dependency then, like you said, an addiction, right?
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing. So, and almost what I'm hearing you say is when I can onboard that nurturing part of myself, which is almost like the archetypal mother, and then the protective part of myself, which is like the archetypal masculine. I can embody those in me, and it's that classic cliche thing, that bumper sticker cliche of like, you have to be whole yourself first, otherwise you will always be seeking that validation from external means.
Yes, that's right. So say if you're a man and you don't nourish yourself, you don't know how to nurture yourself, you don't know how to soothe your own emotions, then you might just be outsourcing that to other women.
Yeah, and always looking for a woman to complete you. And then throw the cultural like stereotyping on top of that you need someone to complete you, and then wrap it up and like that's it.
Yeah, that's right. Whereas, fortunately, when I met my partner, like he knows how to be on his own and, and cultivate connections and friendships with other people. And he has male friends and female friends and gets a lot of that nourishment and nurturance, out. So there wasn't an addictive feel to it. It wasn't like break up with one person, gotta go to the next, that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting because you can kind of almost see that as a hallmark of like a healthy relationship, is to become healthy and whole on our own first. And it is cliche and it gets said all of the time. And the thing that I experience the most, even in private practice, is people going, okay, well, how do I do that? First of all, like how do I get to that place so that then I can either find a healthy relationship or grow into the relationship that I'm already in. I think that there's a bit of a misnomer out there that you have to end a relationship in order to be able to achieve that sort of individuation as well.
Yeah. So it's hard to know if you need to spend a certain amount of time on you're ready for a relationship. There's so many different variations. So
yeah. And I think the thing that really, you posted something on Instagram a few weeks ago maybe, and it was something, it was around this quadrant of like feminine relating, and I just want you to basically talk me through that, because it really piques my interest about that, this kind of idea of these internal archetypes, and your understanding of that. It was super interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're familiar with transactional analysis, and the games we play, and I'm okay, you're okay, I'm not okay, you're not okay, all of that stuff. And it started to occur to me that, there's these different positions that you can embody at any moment in your relationship as a more feminine partner. So what I had in the top left quadrant was the youthful lover mode. And then in the top have the mature companion mode. And I consider both of those modes to be high in feminine energy. One is more of a youthful kind of, flirtatious, seductive type of mode. And the energy feels young, even if you're 60 years old, you can still bring this youthful lover energy, and it's high in feminine energy. And then mature companion is just, that part of us that wants to nurture and attend to our partners and spend time with them, and, cook dinner and have dinner together, and that type of mode of relating. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
And then, and then in the bottom quadrant, so in the bottom left quadrant, I had the wounded girl. And then in the bottom right quadrant, I had the armored lady. So when you're wounded, it's possible for you to be giving anything to the relationship in that moment. You can't be sort of giving to the relationship because you're so wounded. You have to take care of yourself. So that's where sort of feminine energy goes down. And what we typically do is, instead of integrating that with our own healthy side and expressing why we're wounded and what we need and being vulnerable and sharing that, instead of doing that, what I find women do is become armored. And guarded, and want to protect themselves from feeling so exposed and vulnerable. So we do all sorts of things, like we become scolding, we become cold, we become critical, we might try and detach from the pain by numbing ourselves with alcohol or distractions.
And so
work,
so if you can compare the armored lady to what was the other one? The armored lady and at the top.
Mature companion.
Mature companion. So I mean, so in terms of actually relating on a day-to-day kind of basis, what's the difference between those two women?
So the difference would be mainly that one is heart connected and the other's not heart connected.
Right. And so, the sense that I get is perhaps that maybe the kind of mature companion is more likely to be able to express her emotional needs. And she is more able to, how do I say, it's like she's available to express her emotional needs, but then she's also like, I can do this for myself, but it would be really fun for us to do it together. Whereas the armored lady's like, I don't need you. You can, like,
fine. Yeah, that's right. So the mature companion, who is a feminine essence partner, would be saying things like, hey, when you do that, I feel hurt, and that gets in the way of our connection. And I want us to be loving to one another. And so she's a voice for the relationship. She's a voice for the connection. She's not hiding that. She's saying our connection is important. And so when this happens, I'm not saying this to attack you. I'm saying this because I care about you, and I care about me, and I care about us. So that's mature companion. But then the armored lady would be hiding the fact that she's hurt, hiding the fact that her relationship relationship is a priority, and she cares about the relationship, and she cares about feeling united with her partner.
And you see that all the time, you know, often with couples, it's like they both just like, it's like the toys get thrown out of the pram, and it's almost like they're both in their wounded aspects of themselves, so that then they can't, no one's a voice for the relationship at all. So that entity almost just gets abandoned, and they both go to their corners.
Absolutely. And I always say someone has to be a voice for the connection, and it's more likely to be the feminine partner. Like, I'm not very PC. I don't say everyone has to have equal roles in the relationship. Like, I just don't buy into that. I say people bring different gifts to the relationship, and the feminine partner is most often the first one to feel the separation of the relationship. And to be hurt by that, and to be impacted by that.
And I love that, because I think when we're healthy and sovereign in ourselves, we can actually be the voice for the connection, and both parties ultimately ought to be a voice for the connection, which is a separate entity to when I'm able to be sovereign.
Yes. And ideally, a masculine partner is willing to be influenced by the voice of the feminine partner, is willing to say, hey, if she's got an emotional complaint, it's going to be everyone's benefit if I listen to what that emotional complaint is, rather than getting defensive. Because if he trusts the feminine, he needs to trust the feminine.
Yeah, this is interesting. And so how does trust then play into this? Like, how does trust then break all this, or mistrust, for want of for probably a better way of framing it, break all this down?
Yes. So say if a masculine partner, say if a masculine partner didn't trust emotions, didn't trust women, didn't trust that the feminine wants to nurture and nourish, then he's just going to push, back against any sort of emotional expression, and get defensive, and see that as some kind of attack, and some kind of attempt to disempower him, for example. So that's not going to fare well in the future, because a masculine partner will need to learn to trust the feminine, and the feminine partner needs to learn to trust the masculine.
And I would say it possibly, and has this been your experience, is that a masculine partner that perhaps, or that is experiencing those emotions, can also then regress into their wounded child as well, and just become very avoidant and dismissive.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I can imagine, like, he could either become really armored, like he could become the armored man.
So what you might. Yeah. I know. I've been trying to think of how a masculine version of that would look, but not being a man, I don't know. But anyway, typically what you see.
Research.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, this is not always the case, but it is the case in my relationship, is when my partner's more wounded, he'll withdraw, he'll shut down, become distant, and more autonomous, like go even further into the masculine, if you like. Whereas if I'm wounded, I just become more and more upset, and it doesn't get better, and it kind of just escalates.
Which explains energetically perfectly that thing that you see quite often in relationships, where she'll be like, he's pulling away, and she'll try and then go and fix it, and he'll pull away further, and it's like, or vice versa. But it's this anxious avoidant kind of to bring up let's chuck attachment styles on top of this too, but it's that kind of that anxious
but that's kind of is what's going on. Yes. So what's needed, so this person that's becoming more anxious and dysregulated needs to access more of their own autonomy, which is healthy masculine, and go, okay, working things out can wait. I don't need connection in every moment of every day. I don't need my partner's empathy and understanding right now. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's enough stability in the relationship that this can wait till tomorrow or in a couple of hours. So that person needs to draw more from their own autonomy masculine energy. And then this person who withdraws and distances themselves actually needs to bring a little bit more of the feminine, which is that more the connection, the communication, the I just need a bit of space right now. We're fine, but you know, I'm just feeling really overwhelmed. You know, give me a couple of hours. Like they need to actually communicate and honor the relationship.
And to be fair, I think that's been such an undervalued trait, is that feminine energy, that receptivity, that capacity to be open to life on life's terms. It's something that is culturally, because what all of us ultimately do, because so many of us, you know, the kind of industrial revolution, the kind of culture that we currently live in, we are and Western society particularly is very individualistic. Therefore, we do tend to want to go to our corners more than to fight for the connection, you know?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think this.
Yes. So if a guy just took that one thing from what I just said and all he needs to do is communicate, just a little communication about, hey, I need some space. Look, you know, we're fine. Like that would just do wonders for the relationship. That's almost like a form of repair. And then the feminine partner's like, oh, okay, I can handle that. I can handle that. Knowing that you're not disappearing forever, but that you just need space, I can tolerate that.
And I think going back to what you said at the very, very start, is like, it's getting okay with being vulnerable. It's getting okay with expressing emotion. It's getting and being able to articulate emotion, because let's face it, most of us are so disconnected from our felt sense. You know, we're busy on social media, we're working, we're doing whatever, we're so busy on Netflix, so busy distracting ourselves, that capacity to really engage with our emotions first of all as a sovereign individual and then articulate them. And I think actually since COVID, that has been the thing that's been really amplified. You know, is that something you've seen over in Oz as well?
Which part? The like difficulties expressing and articulating emotional needs?
Yeah, and the emotional side of things. So for me, like for what I've been seeing, and it's interesting, because I feel like what has happened as a result of, you know, the current kind of climate is that any emotions that we've already been experiencing have been amplified. And so just the amplification of emotion, I think, is what I'm kind of getting at.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I think what happened with COVID is that any emotion that you haven't processed or you've attempted to shove down and suppress over decades or years or whatever,
generation
bubbles to the surface. And so if you don't have the language, and right. So if you're not connected to what your emotions and needs are, then it's going to be a very overwhelming experience for you, as all of these unprocessed emotions come to the surface and you can't sort through them in your inner world. And you can't go, oh, this is about how I've been feeling a bit lonely in my relationship lately, or this is about wanting more quality time with my partner. Like if you don't have insight into what the source of the discontent is, it's going to be quite overwhelming, and then maybe you'll blurt out and blame your partner for everything. It's all your fault.
And it's interesting, and like it's this almost this sense of like disquiet emotionally that's kind of been going on, and it's not the inability to, it's the disconnection from our felt sense, our emotional selves and our emotional bodies. And then I think it's difficult, because when you can't feel, when you're kind of walking around a little bit emotionally disconnected, how do you then articulate how you feel when you're not really fully feeling?
Yes, yeah. Well, sometimes in my coaching of women and they can't find the words, you just say, well, imagine you're 2 years old. Like a 2-year-old might go, blah, I feel blah. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't have great words yet, but generally like a 2-year-old kind of is quite in touch with how they feel, and they might not have great words for it, but start there. Go, I feel yuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
or basic words. I feel sad, I feel bad.
I think noises and blahs and all that sort of stuff. That's perfect.
Blah.
Yeah, that's perfect for me. I think
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
I
yeah,
completely regress to that.
yeah. Yes. Oh, totally. Because some, like a lot of the women that I coach are therapists, and they're like, how can I articulately express what I'm feeling and stay calm? I'm like, forget that. Just, start with a far more basic, spontaneous feeling. Like, I feel horrible, or, just I say three words. I feel this, and then full stop. You've got to learn how to put a full stop, because a 2-year-old knows how to, say how they feel using 3 words.
Yeah, and this is it. And I think it's like, first of all, being able to access the emotion, then articulate it, and then like, and I think that final stage almost is being able to do that in a romantic partnership, because it's almost when you can do that in a romantic relationship and navigate someone else's emotional landscape and not have it, it's going to, when it's a bit, it's gonna throw you off balance a little bit, but it's not going to completely derail you or your sense of who you are.
Yes. No. If you trust that emotional expression is a healthy thing in a relationship, then you're going to start practicing it, and you're going to start using that 3-word sentence. I feel sad today, and learn how to put a full stop. And you'll just start to trust that saying how you feel is going to be received well by a partner that really genuinely cares about you.
Yeah. And I mean, I often will say to people when I work with them, try this stuff out in your friendships first. Don't take my word for it in your emotional, like in your romantic partnerships with people. Like, that's probably not, like, if you're already feeling anxious about that, try it out with some girlfriends, just to, I feel, and like literally just let them have it. And you'll be surprised at how much your intimacy deepens just in your friendships. And then as they grow in confidence, it's like then they start to take it out into their romantic relationships as well. And it's profound, because then you start getting that back as well. When you start putting that energy out there, if you let yourself be vulnerable, then people are like, oh my God, this is actually a safe person for me to.
Yeah, you model that. And also another thing that I will say is, I use chair work dialogue. So you could have a chair for your client and then an empty chair for their partner that they're so afraid of showing their emotions to, and have them say to that partner in an empty chair, I feel sad when you say that you're going to call me and you don't, or whatever, and have them experience their own voice. Like, a lot of they haven't even tried it out. They haven't even opened up their mouth and heard what they sound like when they get vulnerable and say how they feel.
Yes, and yeah, you do tend to find this a lot, because it's almost like it's almost like the words won't come out, like that somehow expressing an emotional need, there's been somewhere along the line, be it in their history, in past relationships or whatever, that has people not able to actually just verbally express a need. So then it seems to do this thing where it goes a bit rogue and people start to physicalize needs as well. And that's where a lot of the sexual kind of acting outside of relationships and things, that's something that seems to come into this quite a lot.
Yeah. And I would say that if you're being emotionally expressed, then there's not going to be any sexualizing going on, because there's this connection between your heart and your body, everything. So then the sexual connection is just more, I'd say, if you're being real with your emotions.
So the sexual connection is an extension of the already emotionally safe place that created, not something that you do to get the emotionally safe or to experience the emotion as and of itself.
Yes. Yeah. Well, generally when I'm working with women, I find that 9 times out of 10, we need to feel emotionally safe in order to open up sexually to our partners.
Yes.
And I think maybe the older that you get, the probably more important it is to have that full connection between how you feel and the sexual relationship with your partner. I don't know that that's necessarily true for men. Like maybe men can have sex without feeling emotionally safe. I can't speak for them. But in all the coaching that I do with women, most of the time when they say there hasn't been a lot of sex lately, it's because they haven't resolved something emotional with their partner. They've had to bury their emotions.
And if that continues for a long period of time, then that's when the relationship does become that it's no longer a physical relationship anymore, because it's almost like there's all the ghosts around of the emotional needs that were not expressed.
That's it. Yeah, it's almost like so many layers have built up on top of that more pure sort of sexual connection, that it's too masked and armored, and it's buried underneath all those layers. So because I was aware of that, I was like, I'm not doing that ever again in my own relationship. I'm going to honor how I feel, and I'm just going to, as quickly as possible, express how I truly feel in my relationship, so that my emotions are always part of the relationship dance, right? Not something that I address a year later or 6 months later. I go, oh, can I talk to you about that thing that happened? I won't do that anymore.
And that's the biggest thing that from everything that you've said that has really stood out to me is this how essential it is to actually just be all out there with exactly how you're feeling, exactly what's going on for you, because that's the only way you're going to get anything genuine back. And also because otherwise you're going to just be building up all of this internal resentment like a pressure cooker just waiting to go.
Yes. And if you can just trust that if you get a bit snotty and you've got tears coming out and your voice wavers when you're expressing how you feel, that's way better than waiting until some point in time where you feel totally composed and only expressing your feelings when you feel like you can say it in a nice polished way. I would say please don't wait for that. Say it and have all the snot and tears coming out and whatever. Just be messy.
And that is completely brilliant. And it's just like it's that permission. It's almost like this, you give yourself permission to experience, to express the fullness of your emotions, and okay, like no one ever died of upset, like it's this it's okay to express ourselves, and it's okay to not have to, and it feels like a breath of fresh air to actually start to say that. It almost feels like a deep breath.
I know. And there's actually something I think quite endearing about women when they are vulnerable and their lip quivers a bit because they're about to cry. Like, that's not a turn off. That's what I want. That's not a turn off.
Yeah. And it's just amazing to me though. Like, and I will always say to people, don't underestimate the power of a good ugly cry. Like
that's it.
Like no one ever felt worse off for like having that really visceral ugly cry.
Oh my God, no. Yeah, that's right. You get in touch with such deep needs when you're on the floor crying. Like, I love it. I love doing it because I'm like, I get so clear about where this pain's coming from. It's just like there's so much guidance,
and that can be done in relationship or on your own as well. You need to process a big emotion first before you take it into your relationship. Totally down with that as well. Like, either or, but it's so interesting because, and when you are able to experience the fullness of your emotions, that's sexuality is an extension of that. It doesn't come from it's like almost like functioning from the inside out rather than the outside, having to, and I think a lot of the time with women, like that sexual energy is incredibly powerful. It's that energy of kind of creation, of creativity.
It's very powerful, and it's not only powerful for the person on the receiving end of it, it fills us up as well. We feel powerful when we're connected to it. So it's not just one person taking something from us, we're energizing ourselves by being connected to our emotions, our bodies, all of it. Like it's sort of you will notice your mood is better, your energy levels are better, you feel more confident in the world.
And it allows you to experience, to share the fullness of who you are with another person. And it's interesting to me because culturally, you know, sex has become very externalized. It's become something like pornography use has increased massively during COVID. I saw the stats the other day, and it's crazy. And what do you feel like, because I know with sex and sexuality, it's when did sex stop becoming like like a sharing of commitment and emotional kind of connection, and become like an almost like a physical act, like a show? You know, talk to me a bit about that, because I know you're going to have something interesting to say.
Oh, I think it's always been objectified, I think, as you know, from you know, thousands and thousands of years. Yeah, I think there's been an element of using sex in that like as a commodity type of thing.
Yes.
But it's, when I think about sex in the context of a relationship, there needs to be a healthy feminine voice there saying, sex is not just something that one person takes from another. It's something that can guide us into a deeper connection with ourselves as individuals, and also we can create more as a couple in this relationship. Yeah. So I see that as no, that would be healthy feminine and healthy masculine coming together, because a healthy masculine is like, I want you to open up just to me, you know, and for us to create that together.
Interesting. And it's and it's so fascinating to me, because so much of the time I don't think that we understand as humans that our sexual energy is our own, and it's something that we have as a gift to share with someone, rather than you know, I think a lot of us kind of see that sexual energy and sexuality is something that we need to take from the outside and drag in, rather than actually saying, actually, this is my energy that I can take and share with someone else.
Absolutely. And I do feel that there are different gender messages that young people receive around boys' sexuality and girls' sexuality, at least in the era and the culture that I grew up in. Like, so boys were allowed to sleep around and take whatever they needed sexually, and not feel guilty or bad or ashamed about that. But then the young girls were getting the opposite message, that that they couldn't take ownership of their sexuality.
Yeah, and that their sexual needs were somehow dirty or disgusting, or that they
and all that sort of slut shaming stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Huge.
Yeah. So now I've got two daughters, so there's no way in hell I'm passing on any of that rubbish to them.
Great, I love that. And so how do you communicate healthy feminine sexuality to them then?
Yeah, well, they're young, so they're just 9 and 12. So they're not really at that age where that part of their experience, but I encourage them to be in their bodies, and I encourage them to decide for themselves how they dress. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes I'll be like, okay, it's not my choice of outfit, but you do you.
Yeah.
And emotionally, like if they express something, even if I don't agree with them, or I don't agree to meet the need, like if they're like, I don't want to go to such and such today, I'll validate how they feel, even if I say, well, you still got to go, but I know you're disappointed. So I'm very careful to honor how they feel, honor how they want to express themselves in their bodies, that type of thing, so that by the time they reach 15, you know, then it's just a continuation of them being self-expressed.
Yeah, and there's that continuity in their experience as well, that there's not this mixed message that somehow it's okay to be free until you're 14 or 15.
Until you're 14.
Down the hatches and you're attractive now, so you can't go out, you know, like.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I would rather teach my daughters how to assert themselves and how to speak in a in a romantic sort of situation, and how to be true to themselves and where they're at and their readiness, as opposed to telling them not to dress in a certain way. You know what I mean? Like that. I don't think that's the solution.
And this is the thing, like these are the things that should be getting taught in school, because as you said earlier on as well, is that the way that we approach sexuality, and particularly in Australia, I'm not sure if it's so much the same here in the UK, to be honest with you, but it's like we're taught very much about the pragmatics of sex and, like, you know, putting a condom on a banana and all of that sort of stuff. And yet we're not taught about how to healthfully express ourselves in an intimate kind of engagement.
Yes. And I would say, again, that's another example of the feminine missing from that conversation, because all the pragmatics,
Yes.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we're going to talk about the pragmatics and the logistics and the rules and the structure of it, which is just more masculine.
Yeah.
But who is talking to young girls about what they desire most deeply in their hearts?
And that, you're 100% right, and it is completely missing from the conversation. I mean, at least it was when I was in secondary school. It was literally that was what sex education entailed.
Yeah,
that's what
yeah. Whereas when my daughter started on it, I do the same thing with my clients. I'm like, okay, you write out a list. I want a relationship where write down all your. I want a relationship where we're friends as well as lovers. I want a relationship where we want the best for each other. And I would just like encourage more women to get specific about what kind of relationship that you want, and just know what you desire.
This is the thing, like we plan our places where we want to live, what sort of career,
right.
Good at planning,
or what wedding.
Yeah, a wedding. Yeah, exactly. And then we meet a guy, and we're like, yeah, you'll do. You know, and then we spend the rest of the time trying to mold him into like the perfect man, because again, and everything that I do and everything that we teach as you know, particularly the way that I teach, and I know you'd be quite similar, this shit comes from the inside out. It's not the other way around. It's not like, it's that, to use Rogerian kind of psychology, it's not at that external locus of control. We need to actualize from the inside out. And I think that very much exactly what you've spoken with me about today as well.
Yeah, that's right. So the more clear you are about what you desire in a relationship, the quicker you're going to be at spotting whether that person really is a genuine match for that, or whether you are just kidding yourself and hoping that they will turn into that. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're just more honest with yourself.
Absolutely. And I mean, let's not go down the Disney path, because they didn't do much to help us in this message.
Yeah. Well, let's do the Disney. Like, I like romance. I like beauty and all of that. But let's add that mature companion, that grown-up lady in us.
I like that, actually, because I tend to, in my own experience, I tend to demonize Disney a little bit. But you are right. It does give us that. To give it that positive framing, it is like, it does give us that capacity to kind of to have that nice romantic take.
Yeah, because I think when you go too far the other end, you're like, oh, romance is unrealistic and I'm silly and juvenile for dreaming of being in a castle with my prince. But as an energy, as an archetype, I think there's a lot in that. Like, that's how I sort of view my relationship, and it helps me when we're not connecting well. I'm like, oh, but here's my prince, you know.
Yes, yeah, okay, and that kind of makes sense. And again, it's all about our own internal representation of how and how we communicate that with our partners ultimately, and that's going to determine the health or otherwise of that.
Oh yeah, I would say like 90 your relationship occurs in your own, thoughts. So if you're having negative thoughts all the time about your partner, then that is going to dictate how the relationship goes. So I'm very conscious of not going down some rabbit hole of telling a narrative about how my partner is bad, or or I'm a victim or something like that.
Yeah, and it's the classic pulling yourself up and being like, actually, the story I'm telling myself here is this.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
And I think that very much forms our experience, the stories that we tell ourselves kind of on the regular. I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to quickly ask you about your work with other professionals as well, because I know that you work with other therapists around this sort of stuff, and just tell us a bit about that.
Yes. Yeah. So one aspect of working with therapists is that I train them in schema therapy and how to use schema therapy with their clients. So how to use imagery and chair work and etc. How to work with challenging clients.
Mm-hmm.
But then another aspect is working specifically with female therapists who want to do work on their own relationship in the same way that I did once upon a time. But they're also at the same time wanting to learn, I guess, some of the theory or the model or the concept at the same time as getting direction for their own relationship, because they're going to go on and help their own female clients and use their own skills and knowledge of psychology to sort of really help their clients in a more powerful way. So they're the two sort of, yeah.
Yeah, and I can really identify with that, because I know for myself, I've often said, you know, if I had a couple that have been married for 50 years come to me and say, you know, we're struggling with intimacy, I don't have a framework to be able to help them, you know. So therefore, and I think that lived experience element that you were talking about, it's like you understand this because you have a lived experience of it, and then you can almost take people by the hand and be like, actually, I know the way, follow me, you know. It's more that way. When you're working relationally, it's very much more that way than it is, you know, about actually having all the objective answers out of a textbook.
Yeah, and having the training. Like I don't work with couples. Do you know what I mean? Like I actually don't really like having conflict right in front of me. Like my nervous system doesn't love tension already in my own personal life. So having a couple in front of me who are like, you know, where there's walls, I'm like, that's not my cup of tea. But what I know where I can help people in their relationships is guiding the female partner to reconnect with her emotions and trust that the feminine in her is good and is healthy and wholesome, and
she knows the right way to go for her. And whether that's staying in the relationship, whether that's leaving the relationship, it's not about the relationship, it's about your relationship with yourself, your own inner and your ability to be able to express yourself. I think people think that there's problems in the relationship, that it's the relationship's fault. Actually, it might be that the individuals within that situation need to do some work.
And that may or may not be still in that relationship. It may be that they actually never felt a great deal of love for that person, but they chose that person from a more wounded place or whatever. But I think there's so much good to come from guiding women back to their you know, like, and having them trust in their own inner guidance.
I couldn't agree more. And I think I saw this quote. I went to a therapy expo a few years ago, and it said, and the quote was really simple. It was something around like, if a flower isn't flourishing, you change the soil, you change the environment that you keep the flower in. You don't try and change the petals and the actual flower itself.
There's nothing wrong with it. The flower.
And again, it's working from the inside out. And I mean, I talk about this all of the time as well, and it's just I think it's just so fundamental to kind of reframe that and not make other people responsible for how we're experiencing the world.
Because I don't know, the benefit of having a woman really connected to her heart and then enter a relationship from that place is so good for the world. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like I could love my partner over multiple lifetimes. I've got so much love for him, and it's, you know, and it feels energizing to give it. And it's not coming from a wounded place.
And this is the thing, I always say that love is honor and service of self and others. So it's like, it's when it comes from the inside out, when it's this open sharing and connection, it's just it's a really powerful thing. And you're right, it's a limitless kind of wellspring.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. So you know, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but where I'm at right now, you know, I've got so much an abundance of love to give him, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So, you know, imagine if more women just trusted that how they feel is accurate and good.
Yeah, and that you already have all of that inside you. That's huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for jumping on this Zoom with me, Tracey. It's been so nice to catch up and connect. It's literally so lovely. And do you have a website if people are trying to get in touch with you? What are your handles? Talk us through it.
Yeah. So just Dr. Tracey Hunter, Tracey Hunter.com.
Perfect. And you're on Instagram as well. You're on my Instagram.
Yes.
To find you. We might jump on and do a live on there or something at some point. But yeah, it was so nice.
Yeah. Thank you, Lauren. I'm so glad to talk to you too.